we're working on Chapter 8, the markup chapter. There's two sections to Chapter 8. The first part is markup based on cost, and that covers pages 138, 139, and 140. And then the last section covers the last two pages of the chapter, markup based on selling price. So we're going to use similar formulas for these, but there's just enough difference that you just have to know what you're based on in order to know what formula to use. So here's a real simple example. If you look at problem 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, where you have $2 amounts, you have the cost and the dollar markup, you have to add those two together to get the selling price. And if you have, and by the way, these headings here should have really been copied over here. You can do that if you like. If you have the cost and you have the selling price, but you don't know the dollar markup, you're going to subtract selling price minus the cost, and so forth. And that part doesn't matter whether you are based on cost or based on selling price. The only time it matters is when you are dealing with a markup percent. So when you're dealing with a markup percent, if it's based on cost, you can get your dollar markup by taking the markup percent times the cost. And once you have $2 amounts here, for example, the cost and the dollar markup, it's just like it was up here. You're going to add the cost and the dollar markup to get the selling price. And those are all the same here. Let's just move over here to the right side of the screen here. If you have the cost, this is the cost here, and this is the markup percent, and the markup percent is based on cost. If you are trying to find the selling price, the best way to do that in just one operation is to take the percent and add it to 100%. So now instead of 125, we have 225%. Now, to get the selling price, you can simply take the cost times the 225% and you'll have the selling price. The result here is the same as it would have been over here, where you took the percent times the cost and you got a dollar amount, and then you would add those two together in order to get the selling price. So essentially what you're doing here is you're doing that one step in your head. You're adding the 100% to the markup percent, and then you can simply multiply that times the cost to get the selling price. So when you're based on cost, you can take 100% plus the markup percent to get the selling price by multiplying that percent times the cost. Okay, it gets a little bit tricky when you have the selling price, but the markup is based on cost. So once again, you'll use the technique of adding 100% to the markup percent, and so this one will become 160%. But now if you're trying to find the cost, it's a dividing problem and not a multiplication problem. So you're going to take the selling price and you're going to divide it by this percent. Cost will be $775. Okay. If you have $2 amounts, for example, the selling price and the cost, you're going to subtract the two to get the dollar markup. And to get a markup percent, you always have to divide two numbers to get a percent. So if we're based on cost, you're going to take the dollar markup and you're going to divide it by the cost. And be sure to add a percent sign there. Should have 60%. Should always add one decimal place when you're working with percents, just in case it doesn't come out even. Okay, there's a couple of written problems here. I'd like to do one of these with you. Let's do number 24. Number 24, we have an amount. It looks like it's the selling price because it says he sells the item for $960. So we'll call that the selling price. And that's a markup of 275% based on cost. So Markup percent is 275%, it's based on cost. Okay, we're looking for two things here. We're looking for the cost, and we have the selling price. So it's very similar to what we did up here. We have the selling price, we have the markup percent, we're looking to find the cost. We did a dividing operation there, and we also did the 100% plus the markup percent. So let's go ahead and take the selling price, and let's divide it by, not by 275, but by 375%, which is what we would get if we add 100 to that 275%. So this is going to be our cost here, 256. You should label that. Okay, they'd like to know one more thing, the dollar markup. So the dollar markup then is the selling price minus the cost, and there is the dollar markup of 704. We use abbreviations in this chapter, $sign for dollar, MU for markup, and C for cost, SP for selling price, and so on. So that's how you do problem number 24. The rest of these are similar. When you go into the second part of this chapter, the first 6 problems are identical to the ones above, where you are adding or subtracting to find the missing number. But when you get into working with the percents, when you're based on selling price, this part is the same. To get the dollar markup, you take the selling price times the markup percent if it's based on selling price. And we find to get the dollar markup and to find the cost, we're going to subtract selling price minus the dollar markup. Now let's move over to this side of the spreadsheet here. You'll see one major difference here. You'll see 100% minus the markup percent. So this is what you have to do when you are based on selling price. So this can be done in your head, 100% minus the markup percent. This will be 75%. And so what we need to do here to get the cost, we can take 150, which is the selling price, take it times this number here, which we were able to do in our head, and now we have the cost. So this is the major difference in formulas here, 100% minus the markup percent, and if you scroll up to the others above here where they were based on cost, it was 100% plus the markup percent. So that's the main difference between the two methods of calculating markup. Once again, just to review, there's 2 different ways. You can be based on cost, or you can be based on selling price. If you are based on cost and you're working with formulas with the percents, you may need to use the 100% plus the markup percent in order to find your answer. If you're based on selling price, you may have to use the 100% minus the markup percent in order to find your answer. Let's do one more down here where we know the cost, we know the markup percent, but it's based on selling price, and we're trying to find the selling price. So once again, we'll use this strategy here. We'll take 100% minus the markup percent. We can do that in our heads. 100% minus 40 is 60%. And when we want to try to find the selling price, it's a dividing problem. Take the cost, divide it by, not the 40, but by the 60%. And you'll get the selling price. And over here, we have 2 dollar amounts. We have the selling price and the cost. Subtract them to get the dollar markup. If you want the markup percent based on selling price, you have to take the dollar markup and divide it by the selling price. And you should put a percent sign there, add 1 decimal point. Okay, so again, when we found the markup percent based on selling price, we took the dollar markup and we divided it by the selling price. To scroll back up here, when we found the markup percent based on cost, we took the dollar markup, but we divided it by the cost because we were based on cost. So this concludes the video for Chapter 8.